My mother-in-law mocked my pregnancy. Then my doctor revealed something nobody expected. Patricia Whitlock had spent decades believing money gave her authority over everyone around her. She came from a family whose name appeared on hospital wings, charity galas, and trust documents worth more than most people would earn in several lifetimes. In her world, influence solved problems and silence buried inconvenient truths. I came from a very different world. I was a charge nurse. My life revolved around schedules, patient charts, medication records, and facts that could be verified. I trusted documentation more than opinions because paperwork never changed its story halfway through a conversation. When I married Adam Whitlock, I understood that I was stepping into a family that viewed me as an outsider. They were polite in public, but the distance was always there. To Patricia, I would never be good enough for her son. The tension finally exploded during a Sunday brunch at the country club. More than 30 relatives and business associates filled the private dining room. Crystal glasses reflected the sunlight pouring through the windows. Waiters moved quietly between tables while conversations drifted through the room. I had planned to keep the announcement simple. When dessert arrived, I stood beside Adam and shared the news that we were expecting a baby. For a brief moment, the room became silent. Then Patricia laughed. Not a warm laugh, not a surprised laugh, a cruel one. Wearing a bright yellow dress and a heavy gold necklace, she slowly placed her coffee cup onto the table and looked directly at me. "You expect us to believe that?" she asked loudly. Every face turned toward us. Adam shifted uncomfortably beside me. Patricia folded her arms. "Convenient timing, Harper. Especially with that prenuptial agreement." A few people exchanged uneasy glances. She continued without hesitation. "You show up with a pregnancy announcement right when trust discussions are happening. Interesting coincidence." The accusation landed like a slap. I felt my face burn as whispers spread around the room. Patricia leaned back in her chair. "You don't even look pregnant. No symptoms. No complications. Nothing. It sounds more like a strategy than a pregnancy." I waited for Adam to say something. Anything. Instead, he stared at the table. That hurt more than Patricia's words. Around us, nobody spoke. Nobody defended me. As the silence stretched across the room, I realized something important. Patricia wasn't interested in the truth. She had already decided what story she wanted everyone to believe. What she didn't know was that the evidence waiting inside my medical file was about to destroy that story completely. The conversation should have ended there. Instead, it became a performance. Patricia didn't need to repeat her accusation. The damage had already been done. One by one, family members began moving toward her side of the room, as if pulled by an invisible force. Aunts nodded along with her comments. Cousins suddenly became fascinated with their phones. Several people avoided looking at me altogether. Nobody wanted to challenge the woman who controlled so much of the family's wealth. I turned toward Adam. He was standing only a few feet away, hands buried in uncertainty, his expression caught somewhere between embarrassment and fear. For a moment, I thought he was gathering the courage to finally speak. Instead, he stepped closer and lowered his voice. "Harper, please." That single word told me everything. I stared at him. "Please what?" His eyes flickered toward his mother before returning to me. "Just let this go." The room seemed to shrink. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Your mother just accused me of lying in front of everyone." "I know," he said quickly. "I know she went too far." "Then say something." He rubbed a hand across his face. "It's complicated." No, it wasn't. A husband either stood beside his wife, or he didn't. Adam glanced around the room, making sure nobody important was listening. "My firm is negotiating funding next quarter," he whispered. "If this turns into a family war, everything could fall apart." There it was. Not concern. Not support. Money. His mother had attacked me publicly, and his biggest fear was losing access to family resources. I waited for anger, heartbreak, or tears. None came. Years in emergency medicine had taught me something valuable. Strong emotions could wait. Facts could not. The moment a situation became chaotic, I automatically searched for details. Who said what? Who witnessed it? What happened first? What happened next? My mind shifted into the same calm state I used during difficult hospital cases. I quietly opened the notes app on my phone beneath the table. Time, location, witnesses, statements, everything. Adam kept talking, trying to smooth things over with promises that he would speak to Patricia later. I barely heard him. The conversation was no longer important. What mattered was the pattern. The accusation hadn't been spontaneous. Patricia had arrived prepared to challenge me. She had spoken with complete confidence, as though she expected nobody to question her version of events. That realization settled heavily in my mind. People who invent rumors usually leave room for doubt. Patricia hadn't. She acted like she already knew the outcome. As brunch continued around us, I saved my notes and locked my phone. For the first time that afternoon, I stopped viewing the situation as a family argument. It felt more like the beginning of something much larger. The following week should have been routine. Instead, it turned into something I never expected. Patricia refused to move on from the brunch incident. She called Adam repeatedly, sent emails, and even contacted other relatives to discuss what she described as serious concerns. By the end of the week, she had convinced herself that she deserved proof, not medical confirmation. Proof that I was wrong. When Adam informed me that Patricia wanted to attend my next appointment, I thought he was joking. He wasn't. According to him, allowing her to come would put the issue to rest. The fact that anyone believed my pregnancy required family approval was insulting enough. The fact that my husband agreed to it made it worse. Part of me wanted to refuse immediately. Another part wanted this nonsense to end. So I agreed. The morning of the appointment felt unusually heavy. The waiting room was quiet except for the occasional sound of nurses calling patients back. I checked in, completed paperwork, and tried to focus on anything except the woman sitting across from me. Patricia looked completely comfortable. She crossed one leg over the other, designer handbag resting beside her, as though she were attending a business meeting rather than someone else's medical appointment. Every few minutes she glanced at me, not with concern, with expectation, as if she believed she was moments away from exposing a secret. When my name was called, we followed the nurse down the hallway. The examination room felt smaller than usual once everyone stepped inside. Patricia immediately positioned herself near the equipment. Adam lingered near the wall. I sat on the examination table while silence settled over the room. Nobody knew what to say. The tension had become impossible to ignore. For days I had been questioned, judged, and treated like a suspect rather than a family member. Every conversation felt like another attempt to force me into defending my own reality. I lowered my head and pressed a hand against my face. To an outsider, it probably looked like simple tears. It wasn't. It was exhaustion. Exhaustion from being doubted. Exhaustion from standing alone. Exhaustion from watching people choose comfort over truth. The room remained silent. Even Adam avoided looking directly at me. Patricia, however, appeared almost energized by the situation. She kept checking the monitor before the examination had even begun. The confidence in her expression was impossible to miss. She wasn't worried about what the appointment might reveal. She seemed certain she already knew. That certainty bothered me more than anything else. Because normal people ask questions when they don't know the answer. Patricia wasn't asking questions. She was waiting for confirmation. And as the medical staff prepared the equipment, I found myself wondering why she seemed so sure of something that should have been impossible for her to know. The physician entered with the calm confidence of someone who had spent decades delivering difficult news and handling emotional families. She greeted everyone politely, reviewed a few notes on the chart, and then turned her attention entirely to the examination. Unlike everyone else in the room, she seemed completely uninterested in family politics. That alone made me trust her. She explained each step carefully and began preparing the ultrasound equipment. The machine hummed quietly as images started appearing on the monitor. Patricia immediately leaned forward. "There won't be much to see," she said. The doctor didn't respond. She focused on her work. The probe moved methodically as she studied the screen. Her eyes followed details invisible to everyone else in the room. Patricia stepped even closer. "Can you show us the empty area?" she asked. "That would settle this quickly." The physician slowly turned her head. The look she gave Patricia wasn't angry. It was the look of a professional being interrupted while performing an important task. "I'll discuss my findings when I'm ready," she said. Patricia fell silent. For the first time since arriving, someone had refused to let her control the conversation. The room became still. The doctor continued her examination, studying measurements and reviewing multiple angles. Her expression remained neutral. Then something changed. It was subtle at first, a slight narrowing of her eyes, a longer pause, another adjustment of the probe. She looked back at the monitor again. This time she didn't immediately continue. The atmosphere shifted instantly. As a nurse, I recognized the change before anyone else. Medical professionals learn how to hide emotions, but certain reactions are impossible to miss. The physician had seen something unexpected. Adam seemed to notice it too. He straightened slightly. Patricia's confidence began fading. The doctor reviewed the screen several more times without speaking. Nobody dared interrupt her. The silence stretched longer with every passing second. My pulse quickened. Questions raced through my mind. The physician pressed several keys, captured additional images, and compared them carefully. Then she reached for the printer. The machine came to life. A sheet slowly emerged. She picked it up and studied it for a moment before placing it beside the keyboard. No one moved. No one spoke. The only sound came from the equipment operating quietly in the background. When the printing finished, she gathered the images into a neat stack. Her face remained professional, but the seriousness in her expression was impossible to ignore. Whatever she had discovered, it was important. She turned away from the monitor and looked directly at the three of us. Her eyes settled on Patricia first, then Adam, finally me. The room felt frozen. I had walked into that appointment expecting another argument. The physician's expression told me we had moved far beyond that, and whatever came next was about to change the direction of the entire conversation. The physician held the printed image in her hand for several seconds before speaking. Nobody interrupted her. Patricia appeared impatient, expecting a conclusion that would validate weeks of accusations. Adam looked nervous enough to stop breathing. I simply waited. The doctor finally turned the image toward us. "There is nothing unclear about these results," she said calmly. Patricia immediately stepped forward. "Exactly," she replied. "That's what I've been saying." The physician's expression didn't change. "No," she said. "That isn't what you've been saying." The room became silent again. The doctor pointed to specific areas on the image. Then she delivered the words nobody expected. "There isn't a fake pregnancy here, Patricia." A pause followed. "In fact, there are two." Patricia blinked. The physician lowered the page slightly. "It's twins." For a moment, nobody reacted. The words seemed too large to process. Twins. After weeks of doubt, suspicion, and humiliation, the reality landed all at once. I felt the air leave my lungs. The pressure I had been carrying for so long suddenly cracked apart. Tears filled my eyes before I could stop them. Not because I had won an argument, because someone had finally spoken the truth out loud. The doctor handed me the image. My hands trembled as I looked down at it. The proof was sitting right there. Simple. Undeniable. Real. Across the room, Adam stared at the photograph in disbelief. His face shifted from confusion to shock. Patricia looked even worse. She opened her mouth as if she intended to challenge the finding. Then she stopped. There was nothing to challenge. The evidence was literally in front of her. For the first time since this nightmare started, she had no immediate response. The victory should have felt satisfying. Instead, something else caught my attention. The physician wasn't smiling. She wasn't relieved. She wasn't acting like someone who had finished delivering good news. Her eyes had already returned to the computer screen. A deep crease formed across her forehead. She clicked through several records, opened another page, reviewed something again. The room remained quiet. The emotional tension from moments earlier slowly transformed into uncertainty. As a medical professional, I recognized the look immediately. The doctor wasn't focused on the ultrasound anymore. She was focused on the chart. That was rarely a good sign. She continued reading for another minute before leaning closer to the monitor. Then she frowned. A serious, professional frown. The kind that appears when something doesn't fit. I wiped my eyes and watched her carefully. "What is it?" I asked. The physician looked away from the screen and met my gaze. "There is something in your records that makes absolutely no sense." Her voice remained controlled, but the concern behind it was unmistakable. And suddenly, the pregnancy wasn't the most important thing in the room anymore. The physician rotated the monitor slightly and opened a different section of my medical file. "This has nothing to do with the ultrasound," she said. "It's something that appeared in a recent screening report." I sat up straighter. "What kind of report?" "A routine prenatal toxicology review." That answer only confused me. I had never failed a medical screening in my life. The doctor clicked through several pages, carefully reviewing the information before continuing. One of the findings showed trace exposure to a hormone-related compound. I frowned. "What compound?" She gave the name. It meant nothing to Adam or Patricia. It meant something to me, not because I had used it, but because I had heard of it. Certain compounds could interfere with normal hormonal processes and were not something a pregnant woman should knowingly consume. My stomach tightened. "There has to be a mistake," I said immediately. "I don't take anything unusual." The doctor looked directly at me. "What medications are you currently using?" "Only the vitamins my provider recommended." Nothing else? No. She nodded slowly, as though that answer matched what she expected. The concern on her face deepened. That's the problem. The room grew quiet. I had spent years working around medical records, laboratory systems, and prescription databases. Mistakes happened, but something about her tone suggested she wasn't talking about an ordinary error. The physician opened another screen. This result triggered an internal review. She pointed toward a series of electronic entries. At first we believed someone had simply entered incorrect information. I leaned forward. But, she clicked again. But the audit trail shows multiple attempts to modify your file after the result appeared. Adam looked confused. What does that mean? It means the record was accessed several times. The doctor paused. By someone who wasn't directly involved in Harper's care. My pulse jumped. Hospital systems tracked everything. Every login. Every change. Every view. Unauthorized access was taken seriously. The physician continued scrolling through the timeline. Several edits were attempted within a short period. Edits to what? I asked. The prescription history attached to your chart. A cold feeling settled in my chest. The doctor enlarged the record. It appears someone was trying to create a paper trail that would explain how this compound entered your system. Adam stared at the screen. You're saying somebody tried to alter her records? I'm saying the activity doesn't match normal medical practice. Nobody spoke. The physician closed the file and folded her hands together. As a nurse, I understood exactly how alarming that statement was. This was no longer a question about health. Someone had apparently gone looking for my records, and someone had been very interested in changing what they said. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. Whatever tension had been building earlier turned into something sharper, heavier, harder to breathe through. The physician turned the monitor back toward us and pointed at a line of data most people would never notice. It wasn't medical information this time, but system activity logs. Access history, she said calmly. She tapped the screen once. A list of entries appeared, each one showing timestamps, user IDs, and actions taken inside my file. Adam leaned closer, trying to understand what he was seeing. Patricia, however, didn't move forward. She froze. For the first time, her confidence disappeared completely. Her hand drifted down slowly until it gripped her handbag so tightly, the leather creased under her fingers. Her posture changed, shoulders tightening as if the room had suddenly become too small. The doctor continued without emotion. There are multiple unauthorized entries here. She traced one of the lines with her pen. This access did not come from your assigned medical team. A silence followed that felt different from before. This wasn't confusion anymore. It was recognition of something serious. Adam finally spoke, voice unsteady. Who accessed it? The physician didn't answer immediately. She studied the log again, double-checking details she already knew were correct. Then she turned the screen slightly so we could all see it clearly. This account, she said. A highlighted identifier appeared. It was linked to an institutional profile. Not a personal login. Not a staff member on record for my care. A corporate-level account tied to a medical foundation. Adam blinked. That's not possible, he said. The doctor looked at him directly. It is possible. And it happened. Patricia's breathing changed. I noticed it before I even looked at her properly. Short, controlled, almost silent. Her fingers tightened around her bag again, as if holding onto it was the only stable thing left. The physician continued. The account is registered under the Whitlock Medical Foundation. The words hit the room like a weight dropping into still water. Adam stepped back slightly. What does that mean? He asked. It means someone with institutional authority accessed this patient's records outside standard procedure. The doctor's tone stayed professional, but her eyes sharpened. This is not routine viewing. This is repeated entry and modification attempts. I felt my throat tighten. Patricia didn't speak. She didn't deny anything. She didn't question the system. She simply stood there, unmoving, as if waiting for the room to reset itself. The doctor closed the file again, but the damage was already done. Every detail now connected in a way none of us could ignore. And for the first time, the conversation wasn't about suspicion anymore. It was about accountability. The pieces that had been scattered across the last few days finally began to align. What initially looked like separate incidents now formed a single connected pattern, each detail pointing toward a direction that was hard to ignore. The physician stayed quiet for a moment, reviewing everything again with the kind of focus that comes when a case stops being routine and turns serious. Adam stood still, as if waiting for someone to explain it in a way that made it less real. But no one softened it. The truth didn't come gently. It came clearly, step by step. The irregular substance found earlier wasn't an isolated issue. It matched a type of compound that doesn't belong in standard prenatal care and is not distributed through normal hospital channels. It would require access beyond a typical prescription pathway, and timing that aligned too precisely with changes in my records. That alone raised concern. But the physician wasn't stopping there. She pulled up another linked report, showing delivery records tied to prescribed supplements I had been taking under supervision. "Your intake history doesn't match your prescription history," she said. That sentence shifted everything, because it suggested interference between what I was supposed to receive and what was actually recorded. The gap between those two things was where the problem lived. The doctor didn't speculate. She stayed on data. Batch numbers, dispensing routes, authorization levels. Each layer added more weight to what was already forming into something difficult to dismiss. The most disturbing part wasn't just the compound itself. It was how carefully the system showed it could have been introduced without immediate detection. A controlled adjustment. A quiet substitution. Something that would not raise alarms until after the fact. Adam's expression changed slowly as he followed the explanation, like he was trying to catch up with something moving too fast. I felt my thoughts slow down instead. Not from shock anymore, but from clarity. This wasn't random. It wasn't confusion in the system. It was direction. A deliberate sequence of actions placed into a process that normally assumes trust. The physician leaned back slightly. "This kind of alteration requires coordination," she said. "Either from someone with direct access or someone operating through compromised credentials." That distinction mattered, because it turned the situation from an error into intent. I looked at the chart again, trying to separate what was medical from what had been manipulated. But the pattern was too consistent, too structured. Even the timing of each entry lined up with moments I remembered clearly. Appointments, prescriptions, follow-ups. All of it now felt different in hindsight. The physician closed the file, but her expression stayed firm. "This doesn't happen without purpose," she added quietly. No one responded, because at that point, there was only one question left that mattered. Not what happened, but why it was arranged this way in the first place. The room stayed still for a long moment after the explanation ended. No one seemed ready to move forward from what had just been revealed. Adam looked lost, like he was standing in a place where every rule he understood no longer applied. Patricia didn't speak at all. Her earlier confidence was gone, replaced by a quiet tension in her posture that she couldn't fully hide. I felt something shift inside me. Not panic, not sadness, clarity. The kind that comes when emotion finally stops driving the moment. I wiped my face slowly and took a steady breath. The shaking in my hands stopped first. Then my thoughts settled into something structured, almost automatic. Years of working in a hospital had trained me for situations where chaos needed order, where decisions couldn't wait for feelings to catch up. This was one of those moments. I looked at the physician directly. "I need full certified copies of everything," I said. She didn't ask what I meant. She already understood. "The IT access logs, the full audit trail, and the original toxicology report," I continued, "along with the ultrasound records and imaging confirmation." My voice didn't break. It stayed even, controlled. "I want everything verified and sealed." The doctor nodded once, already moving toward compliance. Adam finally turned toward me. "Harper," he started, but stopped halfway. I didn't look at him. My attention stayed on the documentation being prepared. This wasn't about arguments anymore. It wasn't about who believed what. It was about record integrity, evidence, traceable facts that couldn't be rewritten or softened later. As the physician began printing and securing the files, I stood up slowly from the table. My legs felt steady again. Across the room, Patricia shifted slightly. For the first time, she didn't try to interrupt or control the situation. She simply watched. I turned toward her. Not quickly. Not emotionally. Just directly. She avoided my eyes for a moment, then forced herself to look back. The silence between us felt heavier than anything said earlier. I held the printed packet in my hands once it was handed over. The pages were thick, official, stamped with validation marks that confirmed authenticity. This was no longer conversation material. It was documentation. I stepped a little closer so my words would land clearly. "You wanted proof of life," I said calmly. A pause. "Now you have proof of a crime." No raised voice, no anger in tone, just finality. The words didn't invite response. They ended the discussion. Patricia didn't answer. Neither did Adam. For the first time, the control in the room didn't belong to the people who had been speaking the loudest. It belonged to the records in my hand. The days that followed didn't look like chaos from the outside. There were no public arguments, no dramatic confrontations, no emotional outbursts meant to satisfy anyone watching. I didn't return to the family home. I didn't answer calls that had no purpose. Everything unnecessary was cut off. What remained was process. I delivered the certified medical records, audit logs, and verified reports directly to a federal-level legal authority through formal submission channels. Nothing was exaggerated. Nothing was interpreted. Only documented facts were presented exactly as they were issued. From that point forward, the matter stopped being personal and became procedural. Investigators didn't ask for opinions. They asked for sequence, access history, authorization paths, and documentation sources. Every answer already existed inside the files I had secured. When the review expanded, multiple systems confirmed the same pattern of unauthorized access and record manipulation tied to institutional credentials. That alone shifted the case into a higher legal category. Patricia's legal team attempted to contain the situation, but the structure of the evidence left very little space for negotiation. The audit trail was complete. The medical integrity violations were traceable. The timing of each entry matched external events too precisely to dismiss. Within days, the tone of all communication changed. Requests replaced demands. Statements replaced arguments. Then came the settlement phase. It was not a discussion. It was a structured agreement presented under legal pressure involving multiple charges, including data breach activity, medical interference, and endangerment-related violations. The language was formal, but the meaning was simple. The consequences were unavoidable if it went further. Patricia signed, not because she accepted responsibility, but because there were no alternatives left that protected her from escalation. The agreement dissolved every financial claim previously used as leverage. Trust protections were neutralized through legal separation terms that could not be challenged later. Assets tied to the marriage were divided in a way that ensured stability rather than control. I didn't argue for more than what was fair. I didn't need to. Once everything was finalized, I stepped out of the process as quietly as I had entered it. No final confrontation was necessary. No final speech was required. I returned to my life without obstruction. My professional standing remained intact. My financial independence was secured. The home was retained under my name through the finalized settlement terms, and no further claims could be made against it. What mattered most was simpler. There was no more interference, no more distortion of facts, only stability moving forward. The system had done its work, and I didn't look back to check the cost. If you enjoyed this story, drop a comment and let me know your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. See you in the next one.